Hi, Pastor Charlie here for New Hope Lutheran Church. Welcome to Pastor Charlie's Toolbox. Today, I'm getting my wheelbarrow ready for spring. There's not much to do with a wheelbarrow because there's not a lot of moving parts. It's not like I put an engine and transmission in it yet. And mostly you have to look after the tire, and the big thing is to make sure there's enough air pressure in the tire of your wheelbarrow. Now, I use two kinds of air pressure gauges, and I have to admit, one of them is my favorite. And my favorite is this one right here, because you hook it up here to your air supply. You put this end onto your valve stem, and to put air in, you pull the trigger here, and it will show you on this gauge just how much air pressure there is in the tire. It does a lot, which is why it's my favorite. The other one I use, it's an old-fashioned kind of air pressure gauge. Basically, there's a little stick in here that pops up once you have put that on the valve stem. I'll show you. So, it pops up and there's little numbers on there to read, and you can see how much air pressure you have in your tire. It's simple, it's handy. It's still not my favorite, and the reason for that is, with something like this, the first thing you would do is you check your air pressure. You might find it's low. So, for me, I connect this to my air hose, and then I fill up air in the tire, but how much air is in there? I don't know. I have to check it with this. I check it with this. It's usually too much, so I have to let some out. And then I find I don't have enough again. I have to put some in. I have to check it. I have to put some in. I have to check it. I have to take some out. I have to check it. It takes a lot longer. And that's why this one's my favorite. Now, that doesn't mean I'm just going to toss this one out. Oh no. The trouble with this one is I need to be able to connect it to a hose from my air compressor. Otherwise, it won't work. It's useless. Or what if I loan it to someone and I don't get it back for a while? What do I use then? Or what if it breaks for some reason? What do I use then? I've always got this one. This is my backup. This is the one I can count on at all times. So it might be, even though it's not my favorite, it might be the more important one. And the reason I talk about all this today is because I was reading our lesson from Acts 1 with all these verses in it. And in that lesson, we find kind of an odd situation. The followers of Jesus decided that they needed to elect someone as an apostle to replace Judas. So, they put two people forward, and to decide which one of those two would be the right one, they cast lots, which, well, in all honesty, it's kind of like pick the short pencil out of these two. Okay? So each person would pick out a pencil. There's one. There's the other one. Shortest pencil wins. That's the basics of that kind of election. Because there were only two candidates, in our lesson that was a pretty simple process. And they chose some guy named Matthias to be the 12th apostle. What we may wonder, though, is how did the other person feel about it? I mean, it's bad enough that, according to this lesson, the folks in the early community seem to have trouble with the other person's name. He's described in there as Joseph, who's called Barsabbas, and he's also known as Justus. Wow! Talk about an identity complex. But don't you think you would have been at least a little bit miffed that he was one of the ones nominated, but he wasn't chosen? I mean, what did he ever do to lose? Now, his entire claim to fame was that I was almost one of the apostles. Almost. That's not really the kind of thing you put down on your resume, is it? And I realize that is how most of us might think about this poor man, and if we were in his place, well, that whole event might anger us. I mean, it was so close. There were only two choices. Why wasn't I chosen? What value do I have now? The thing is, when we talk like that, I get the feeling most of us wouldn't have made it to the level of the 12 apostles, which means if we're lucky, we might make it as far as Justus, who was just lucky to be nominated for such an awesome position. And we shouldn't underestimate that he was one of the ones considered. While we don't hear any more about Justus in the Bible, I get the feeling that he was still very much a valued member of the community of believers. And while he might not have wound up as one of the members of the inner circle, he had still been there all along to witness Jesus' ministry. He still had abilities, and the community still respected him. So if you ever wonder about your value in the community of believers, think about Justus. He may not have reached the top level. That doesn't mean he wasn't still valuable in the eyes of the community and in God's eyes. I mean, if he didn't have value, he never would have even been nominated in the first place. Each one of us is nominated to be and do something on this earth, to serve God just in the same way Justus served. Jesus, in fact, showed us that serving is how we become great. And even to be mentioned in these verses shows how valued Justus was. Many followers who did great things were never even named, not because they didn't have value, but because there were too many to write down all those names. So today I want you to remember that just like this pressure gauge, just like Justus, you have value in God's eyes. Today's lesson is an example showing that regardless of where you fit in, you still have immense value in the kingdom of God.